welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. I am your man J.P. and on today's video, I'm calling it The Evolution of Wrestlemania. I had originally planned to go back in and talk about each individual WrestleMania, but I think instead of that, and then I might still do that somewhere down the road, but for now, I'm going to collapse it all into one video, and we're going to sort of talk about the evolution of WrestleMania 1 through probably 14. And mostly because that's when they got into the Attitude Era. And that's when I stopped caring so much about the WWF and switched over to primarily just WCW. But we'll get there. So in 1985, wrestling was pretty hot. It was a pretty hot commodity, and that's all thanks to Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. You know, the two of them together sort of, brought wrestling to new heights, and wrestling was becoming a household name. It was becoming a household thing where kids were buying the action figures and watching it religiously on TV every week. And Vince McMahon wanted to go bigger. He wanted to go... He wanted to go international. So he came up with this idea for a huge, huge event. And I think Howard Finkel was the guy that came up with the name WrestleMania. And so Vince put all of his money, everything he had, into the first WrestleMania. And if it failed, the WWF would also fail. So it ended up being a success. And it was all centered around that main event. And at the first WrestleMania in 1985 at Madison Square Garden, how appropriate, but the WWF title wasn't even on the line, but they had Mr. T as Hulk Hogan's partner against Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful, two guys who were very vocal that they didn't like Mr. T, they didn't want him in their world. So, hence this match, and Hulk and Mr. T had made several television appearances on talk shows, and Hulk had guest starred on the A-Team, and Hulk Hogan was very, very popular at the time. And just the previous years when he had won the title from the Iron Sheik. So now we come to the first WrestleMania, the big tag team main event. Liberace was there, Billy Martin was there, all these celebrities, Ricky Schroeder was there, all these celebrities were there. And so it was a big event. But the only way to really see it, you had to either be there live, which the tickets sold out fast. So it was hard to be there live. Or you had to go what was called a closed circuit, which means you would have to go to a movie theater or an arena where they would show it on the big screen. You'd pay a ticket price and go in and watch it on the big screen. So that's how it was, because cable TV was brand spanking new at the time. There was really no pay-per-view. Cable was brand new. Brand spanking new. And I remember specifically because my family jumped on board pretty quickly when it came to cable TV. Because I remember when we got that cable box and, flipping through the channels and still struggling to find something to watch. Anyway. But, so then, WrestleMania 1 was a huge success. Then the next year, they did something different. They had it from 3 simultaneous locations. New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the 3 big major markets. And, the 3 separate locations had a main event for each location. New York had a boxing match with Mr. T and Roddy Piper. Chicago had a big tag team title main event with the British Bulldogs and the Dream Team. And then finally in Los Angeles, the big blue steel cage. Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy. And that was really the peak. That was really kind of the start of my wrestling fandom. Because I remember specifically seeing clips of Hulk Hogan in the blue steel cage and King Kong Bundy, and Elvira was there, and Susan St. James and Ray Charles, and all these celebrities again made an appearance at WrestleMania because it was the place to be. And wrestling was being popular in the 80s. And actually, the previous year, they had Cyndi Lauper. I mean, that was pretty big. But in 86, it was it was just growing and climbing, and it was more popular than ever. And that main event centered around that blue steel cage and Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan was really the focal point for the first 9 years. And then in 87, they did something different. They turned a guy like Andre the Giant, who had been a big baby face for years and years and years. Oh, they turned him heel. Suddenly he was a bad guy. He turned on his brother, Hulk Hogan, and challenged him for the title. We all remember what happened there. Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, biggest WrestleMania of all time. We also got to see Macho Man in that big epic match with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And that card was just loaded. Just absolutely loaded. Bob Uecker was there. Mary Hart was there. Big, huge event. 93,173 fans on hand. Indoor attendance record for any event. And it was a big deal. It was huge. And there was, that was like the peak, tippy top. And then, so the very next year, 88, wrestling is still popular, but the venue they chose for WrestleMania wasn't quite as big. But it was the first of 2 years hosted by future President Donald Trump in the Trump Towers in Atlantic City, New Jersey. But WrestleMania 4 was interesting because it was the tournament, because the WWE title had become vacant because of a controversy with Hulk Hogan and the $1 Million Man and Andre the Giant. So President Jack Tunney put the belt on the line, and surprisingly, Hulk Hogan did not win. Hulk Hogan, I think behind the scenes, wanted to take some time off, spend some more time with his wife and new baby daughter. And so Vince took the belt off of him and put it on the Macho Man. And they started this year-long build-up to the next year, WrestleMania 5, where the Mega Powers exploded. And it was the same venue, same place, pretty much the same vibe. But WrestleMania 5, such a loaded card, in which we saw the Ultimate Warrior lose the title to Ravishing Rick Rude. We saw Hulk Hogan regain the title from Macho Man. We saw the tag titles defended in a handicap match, and it was such a great event. Personally, I think WrestleMania 5 is my favorite of all of them. Just because it was just a loaded card, just the whole vibe. Plus, that was peak WWF in 1989, and then the next year, Vince McMahon wanted to experiment with taking the title off of Hulk Hogan because he felt that the fans were kind of getting tired of Hulkamania. They were kind of getting tired of him ripping the shirts and the prayers and the vitamins and, the training and all that. And, he felt the fans were ready for something new. So WrestleMania 6, at Royal Rumble 1990, they set it up to where Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior would meet in the Royal Rumble match. And they kind of collided a little bit, but there was kind of this build-up where two baby faces, the Intercontinental Champion, the Warrior, WWF Champion Hulk Hogan, would clash in one of the biggest main events ever. And WrestleMania 6 is probably my second favorite of all the WrestleManias, just because of how big it was. And at the time, I admit, I was kind of cheering for the Warrior. Just because, although I still loved Hulk Hogan, I was still a Hulkamaniac true and true, but I kind of was ready for a new champion. I was ready for something else. So they put the belt on the Warrior, and they tried that, and according to them, it didn't really work. Warrior wasn't really drawing money like Hulk Hogan did, so they had to figure out a way to put the belt back on Hogan. Which brings us to WrestleMania 7 in 1991 from the Sports Arena in Los Angeles. Oh, I have to back up. WrestleMania 6 was the first international WrestleMania because it was held in Canada, in Toronto. Back to 1991, Sports Arena in Los Angeles. The original plan was to have it at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, an outdoor venue, but WWF was afraid for Sergeant Slaughter's safety because Sergeant Slaughter had come into the company as a heel, an Iraqi turncoat. This is during the first Gulf War, so to be an Iraqi turncoat, ooh, boy, that's bad. So Hulk Hogan comes in. Warrior had just lost the title, the Royal Rumble, because of the Macho Man. Slaughter was the champion. Hulk Hogan comes in, wins the title for America back at WrestleMania 7, and all is right in the world except Macho Man and Warrior had a career match in which Macho Man lost, so he had to retire. He was only gone for about a year, but nevertheless, it brought him and Miss Elizabeth back together. So, good things there. Okay. So then, at this time, Vince McMahon is still trying to find the next thing, because even though the title's back on Hulk, he knows the fans, they were still ready for something new. So, in comes The Undertaker. There's this big controversial match at Survivor Series where Undertaker beat Hogan with the interference from Ric Flair, which, that's another thing. For the first time ever, Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, two big names, are in the same company at the same time, but Vince McMahon wasn't sold on putting them together. So, Ric Flair interfered in that match. Undertaker wins the title. They have another pay-per-view a few days later called Tuesday in Texas, which Hulk Hogan wins the title again, but President Jack Tunney wasn't happy with the way he won, so he stripped Hogan of the belt. Title was won at the Royal Rumble by Ric Flair. So WrestleMania 8, instead of having Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, it was Hulk Hogan versus Psycho Sid, Ric Flair versus Macho. So, in a wrestling purist mind, it should have been Hogan and Flair, but the WWF, according to them, they tried Hogan and Flair on the house shows, and it just wasn't selling. And so that was their reasoning for not doing the main event, Hogan and Flair at WrestleMania. So I guess in that regard it makes sense, because this was the WWF. This wasn't WCW, this wasn't crossover fans, this was just WWF fans. So WWF, they didn't know who Ric Flair was. The fans that only watched WWF, they didn't know who Ric Flair was. So to them it was just this guy that came in suddenly, and suddenly he's the champion. It didn't make any sense to them. So WrestleMania 8 ended with Hogan beating Psycho Sid in disqualification. It was the return of the Ultimate Warrior, which was exciting, but it was short-lived because the Warrior left shortly after that. But then brings us to a new era in WWF, because Hulk Hogan is on his way out. Yokozuna's here. Bret Hart has stepped up, wins the title from Ric Flair. Ric Flair goes back to WCW. But now here we are at WrestleMania 9, an outside venue at Caesar's Palace. It takes place in this parking lot of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And Bret Hart is in the main event, defending the title against Yokozuna. But beforehand, Hulk is still here. He's still hanging on. But he's in a tag team match with Brutus the Barber Beefcake against Money Incorporated. And this is when Jimmy Hart had turned babyface. He was now managing Hogan and Beefcake. And titles were on the line. Hulk and Beefcake did not win the titles. DiBiase and IRS, got a disqualification victory. They were able to walk away with the titles. So then later on in the evening, Bret Hart loses the title. We all remember what happened. Hulk Hogan swoops in, wins the title from Yokozuna, walks out of WrestleMania 9 as the champion. Some people call it controversial. Some people say, no, Yokozuna should have just been the champion. Whatever. It is what it is. And so, up to this point, Hulk Hogan was really the focal point for all of the WrestleManias. And WrestleMania 9 was kind of the last WrestleMania appearance for Hulk, because at King of the Ring 93, that was Hulk's last pay-per-view appearance in the World Wrestling Federation for a long time. Like a long time, because he went WCW and didn't come back until like 2002. So, we're off to the races with Bret. Because the next year, it was kind of an interesting scenario where there was two winners of the Royal Rumble, so they did this thing where first Lex would wrestle Yoko for the title, and then Bret would wrestle the winner of that match. It ended up being Yoko winning the first match and Bret facing Yoko in the second match. Or in the last match, WrestleMania 10. But WrestleMania 10 took place at Madison Square Garden again. And it was 10 years in the making. 10 years later, they bring it back to Madison Square Garden. They ended up doing the same thing 10 years later at WrestleMania 20. but then never again. So then WrestleMania 10, you know, honestly, WrestleMania 10 really wasn't that good. Just my opinion. It was the last one with Macho Man, because he wrestled Crush, and then we never saw him again at WrestleMania. He would leave the WWF shortly after that. You know, this was kind of the rise of Owen Hart. So Owen Hart actually beat his brother Bret in the first match. That was very good. But then we had like a kind of some lame matches, you know, the Doink the Clown and Dink the Clown versus Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna. It was just, I don't know. The matches at WrestleMania 10 just weren't that good. But there was a ladder match. Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, that was a pretty good match. That's a high-rated match. So then, and that one also had celebrities. That one had like Burt Reynolds and Rhonda Shear and Donnie Wahlberg and a bunch of other guys. But then WrestleMania 11 comes along, and I think they also have some celebrities there. That was like Shawn Michaels and Diesel for the title, but the main event was Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow. But TLC was there, and a bunch of other celebrities. A bunch of football guys were there to be in the corner of Lawrence Taylor. And Big Daddy Cool Diesel defended his title, and Psycho Sid was there. It was just, you know, WWF was transitioning into the new generation. And then in '96, we had the big Iron Man match, 60 minutes, Bret versus Shawn, which some people loved it, some people thought it was boring. I don't know. I thought it was okay. I thought the concept was cool. It had never been done before. So that was Arrowhead Pond, Anaheim, California. And we had Backlot Brawl with Goldust and Roddy Piper. And that, they held no punches. They actually really were duking it out. Not because they hated each other, but just because they wanted to really sell it. But so then we come to 1997's WrestleMania 13. Interesting situation, because Bret is on his way out. So he was there, but he wasn't part of the main event. I think he wrestled Stone Cold. And that was kind of the catalyst for him kind of leaving, I think. And then, but Bret was on his way out. Shawn was injured. So Psycho Sid was the champion. So the only guy they had left in the company that was healthy, that could hold the title, was The Undertaker. Undertaker comes in. He doesn't have Paul Bearer anymore. He beats Psycho Sid, becomes the champion. So it wasn't bad. WrestleMania 13 wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. We had Rocky Maivia versus the Sultan. Sorry. And then finally, we come to the first ever Attitude Era WrestleMania. And it was centered around Shawn Michaels' last appearance for a long time, because he had been injured at the Royal Rumble a few months prior. And that's where we saw Stone Cold Steve Austin win the WWF title for the first time. And from that point, it was off to the races, and Stone Cold was the top guy throughout the Attitude Era until he got hurt. Then it was like a revolving door between The Rock and Stone Cold and The Undertaker and Triple H and Kurt Angle. And, you know, then, so Attitude Era, that's where all this kind of chaos and crap happened, in my opinion. And that's it. So through the years, WrestleMania certainly changed, and it was all, for the first 9, of course, like I was saying, the focal point was Hulk Hogan. Whether he was in the main event or if he was kind of in one of the other matches, he was still the center of attention for all of that. Then after he left, WWF, they were really kind of scrambling to find the next big thing. Then they had Bret and then Shawn, and those two guys did their best to kind of to carry the company. But wrestling, the business aspect, was just kind of declining. People just weren't into it anymore. The steroid trial had a lot to do with that. So there you have it. That's kind of the evolution of WrestleMania. Over the years, in more recent years, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger to where now it's like multiple nights. Now it's like 2 nights, a main event for each night. And so I don't really watch it anymore. That's just me. I prefer the old stuff, which is why we're all here on this channel, because of old wrestling. So that is going to do it for the Wrestlemania. So I'm thinking for my next video, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity, because I'm going to do what I'm going to call a Q&A. So I'm going to give you a chance to submit questions that you like to, or if you want my opinion about something, or if you want to ask questions or whatever, leave in the comments. If you want to comment about your favorite WrestleMania moment, that's fine. But also, if you have a question, leave in the comments below on this video, and maybe I'll do another shorter video asking, okay, submit your questions or whatever, and I'll try to answer them. And if nobody asks any questions, then I'll just get on here and I'll just talk about whatever. So, with that, that's going to do it for this video. So if you're new, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.